Hello and welcome to another episode of Breaking Mayberry, the only podcast that guarantees to repair your relationship with your father. I'm one of your hosts, I'm Marty Schneider.
I'm the other host, Dan Ludwig. If the podcast doesn't, we'll show up, roll up our sleeves, and do it ourselves.
We'll get to work. I should say this offer is only valid if you leave a rating and review or join our Patreon. That's a Patreon bonus material if I ever heard it. And with us today, I'm very excited to have our guest. Quite literally the man who wrote the book on Andy Griffith, the author of Looking for Andy Griffith, coming out next month from University of North Carolina Press, Evan Dalton Smith. Evan, thank you for being on the show with us today.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm really thrilled to talk to you guys about all things Andy Griffith Show and other aspects of the culture. Anything you want to talk about, I'm game. So yeah, I love your show, and thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. We had to like sort of abruptly go into recording the podcast because just doing the chat beforehand, we were just like, we keep podcasting. God damn it. We're leaving all of this on the cutting room floor.
So we just leapt right into it. And so let's continue our leap here. Evan, I think it's kind of safe to say, having read your book, which is very good, by the way, and just say it up front, if you like our show and if you like our whole shtick, you're going to want to buy this book. You're going to want to read this book. But I think it's kind of safe to say that you have a complex relationship with Andy Griffith and Andy Taylor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I loved the show, but I did. He was a father figure to me, and I kind of knew that. I just knew that I was a super fan of the show, but I wasn't like a Star Trek convention level fan. But I still loved it, and I would watch it every time I could since I was a kid. I think it was I grew up in North Carolina, and so Andy Griffith loomed really large over the culture. And my parents were from Mount Airy, which is where Andy's from. So he was very big in our house. Came on television every day where I grew up, and when cable arrived, even more times a day. Like you could just flip channels from one show to the next and just find a black and white one and stay on it, you know. And but when he died in 2012, I wrote an essay for the LA Review of Books about the show. And, you know, it was about other aspects of the culture too. But what I realized happening was, like, when he died, I was actually grieving. I found myself in my office in New York, man in his, I guess I was in my mid 40s at that moment with 2 children. And I don't think I'd cried in 15 years, you know, because I'm a Southerner and don't handle my emotions well. And I was tearing up, and he was like 86 years old and had lived a full life. It's like, why am I upset about this? And so the essay I first wrote was kind of investigating that a little bit, and it turned out a lot of people felt kind of the same way. And the next day after the essay published, an editor at UNC Press emailed me wanting to turn it into a book. And it did get a decent amount of critical response for just you know, LA Review of Books is a fairly kind of small literary, you know, site. You know, it got covered in Salon and Slate and the New Yorker, maybe not Slate, but the New Yorker and other places, like in all their news aggregates and the Atlantic, and you know. So.
And from there, so the book, your book is kind of one of the books I like to read. There's a lot of jumping around in timelines. You kind of tell the story. You get a little meta, and the book partially is about the story of writing the book.
Yeah,
is.
it became.
It is.
Yeah, I was reading Jeff Dyer's Out of Sheer Rage. Have you ever read that
No.
book? And it's about his inability to write a book.
The thing I really like about the book is that it reminded me a lot of Dom DeLillo's White Noise, in that it's like it's almost sort of non like almost non-judgmental about Andy Griffith. It's not necessarily like, I mean, of course there is like the praise of him and like this, but the fascination with him is almost just sort of in the figure of it, and the way it sort of relates this, like, it's kind of trying to turn this sort of mythological figure into a man just by like taking apart the individual pieces of like what got him to where he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, thank you for that blurb. I'm going to use that.
It was largely gibberish, but you can just
send that to the publisher and post on the website tomorrow. It's like Don DeLillo's White Noise. That's great. That's nice to hear. Thank you. No, I don't want to be too inside baseball about it, but if you're curious, like I did labor over deciding how to treat the material, because I love the mythology of it. That's what excited me about it. And I could have tried to write a book more about the man and the picadillos and the trauma and other things. And I touched on it a little bit, but I was really interested in the mythology. I really was, and how cultivated it was, and also that he was a dramatic actor, who had chops. He started out strong, like he was the lead after Marlon Brando. He was Marlon Brando and On the Waterfront, and then Andy Griffith and A Face in the Crowd.
Yeah,
right. Because Kazan goes straight to him. Like,
yeah, that's the line, and that particular aspect. There's a lot about A Face in the Crowd in the book, and
as there should be, because we're
big
fans of that movie here.
Yeah, it's a total gem, and it still holds up, and people still, applaud it and screen it. I imagine in the next election it'll get screened even more.
I think in the book you mention that Elvis Costello has been working on a musical version of it.
Yeah,
that could not possibly be more my shit. Like,
I know.
Extremely my shit.
I turned in the manuscript in 2021, and so it was delayed a little bit before they got me edits, and so the publishing industry is very slow. But when I turned it in, that was the case, and I don't know where he's
current status,
with funding, but he definitely wrote songs for it and has been performing them. So yeah, that would be awesome.
I mean, a thing that you get into is like, how does he go from being a face in the crowd, Dusty Rhodes, to Andy Griffith?
Lonesome
like
Rhodes.
It is Lonesome Rhodes.
Dusty Rhodes is a wrestler.
Dusty Rhodes is a pretty good. He deserves a book too. Dusty Rhodes. He's awesome. I watch wrestling every Saturday. Oh, I think a lot of people asked Andy that, and he was pretty clear. His publicist didn't like it when he said it. They would kick him under the table sometimes when he would say it in an interview. But he did it because he wasn't getting offered any work. And what happened was, it just like they got lightning in a bottle at that show, and they knew it, pretty soon, probably midway through the first season. And but I don't doubt any of them expected it to be what it became later because of syndication. But they also knew that they all loved it and knew it was kind of this perfect show. And it is. Some of the episodes are just perfect. But and how did that happen is the thing, and they couldn't repeat it. So I talk about that in the book. I was really fascinated by these other failures,
Yeah.
Like the new Andy Griffith Show, if you just think about it, like the people, like you say, well, what was it that made it? And so they get all the same people that made the first one together again, and then they make this clunker that's horrible that no one watches, and it's canceled mid-season. So
you can't go home with again with stuff like that. Like you can't restart Arrested Development. It's not like you just once the pulse stops, you can't just even if all the parts are there, you just can't bring it back.
You meant that Ron Howard did Arrested Development,
right?
Yeah.
And, I thought when they brought it back, it was pretty good. But if you could kind of see the seams a little bit. Is that what you're meaning?
By that point, we're in the 70s, right? And TV itself has very different attitudes. TV is changed. It's become much more urban. CBS has already done the rural purge, like trying to bring Andy Griffith sensibilities into that. Plus, I feel like at that point it's kind of got the stink of like desperation, right? Like, all right, this guy's post TV career hasn't worked out the way he wants. Right. Now he's back on. Well, so I can see why that wouldn't work.
You could argue it was part of the rural purge that it was canceled because it was like at the same time. It was 70, 71. And that was about what that was. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's much faster afterwards. Yeah. I want to get back to what Dan mentioned though about the book being about breaking down the myth from the man, which I think is something that all of us do with our fathers at some point in time, right? Like like, especially if you lose a father, if your father dies or your father gets sick, which we've both dealt with on the air before. So I think that, breaking down the idea of your dad from the actual human being that he is something you kind of have to touch on in this book. And Andy Griffith being America's dad and a father figure for a lot of stand-ins, as you point out. So I think it's important to do this analysis. One of the things I like about your book is like I've read biographies of Andy. I've read stuff about this. Yours is kind of the first one that does sort of a deep dive analysis beyond just wasn't Andy Griffith. Here's kind of the facts. Wasn't this show great? I think it's safe to say you have done the number one amount of thinking about the cultural impact of Andy Griffith.
Well, that is.
But 2 and 3 are right here, baby. 2 and 3 are right here.
We're coming for you.
Yeah,
you holding our end of the deal.
Yeah, you guys are. We could just have a show just of me talking about your shows and like asking questions about what you were thinking when you said that.
Okay, so actually, I got one I want to. I got one I want to throw at you. So, the stuff we try to branch off and watch the actors like other works as like our treats to ourselves, and the ones we've watched for Andy are Pray for the Wildcats, Savages, Face in the Crowd, and Murder in Coweta County, and
one episode of Matlock.
And one episode of Matlock, but that one doesn't run through with the thing I was gonna say, which is all of those. Andy Griffith really goes for playing the villain, and it seems like kind of like before and after he was Andy Griffith, he seemed to really gravitate towards playing like charming bastards, like real anything from a scumbag to an out and out psychopath. Like, do you think there's like a reason why that's something he gravitates towards?
I do. He was desperate to get away from his character. He wasn't getting offered work, and he wanted to prove he could do other things. And he discovered. I mean, I wish he had done more film work. Of the things you named, the only thing that was in the theaters that you named was Face in the Crowd, and he's a total, maniac in that movie, but Andy Griffith Show was after that, and it was also on every day, and he just wasn't getting offered work, so he discovered that he could play a pretty good heel, and he found a kind of niche in hour melodramas that were like made for TV movies, and that's what Matlock came out of was one of those hour movies. But of the three you mentioned, they're all pretty bad, except I think Murder in Coweta County's.
I think there's some good stuff to Murder in Coweta County. Yeah,
I'll go to the map for Savages. We had a lot of fun with weird desert pervert Andy Griffith.
It's an odd movie, and they do some bold stuff with that, and I don't know. I don't remember the last time I watched it all the way through, but it's worth noting though that he did enjoy motorbikes in the desert, and he would take his friends and his kid out. And they had a camper, and they'd go out and do that in camp. So he wasn't acting in that sense. He liked getting out in the dirt, But
one thing I really like about your book is the way you play with some juxtapositions. There's you'll just kind of let stuff go non-judgmentally. One part that brings out is when you're talking about people in Mayberry days. You talk about a man who says that he will literally watch Andy Griffith episodes with blinders on, like a horse, so he can just.
I met that gentleman.
And
I don't mean to make fun of him at all or anything like that, but there are super fans that get a lot of meaning from the show.
And literally the next paragraph after that is a woman saying, "It's not a cult."
Yeah,
it's not like a cult. So just the way you put those two.
She knew I was a writer, and that was like the first question I guess would ask her. But I came at it from a fan's point of view, and I didn't do a lot of. When I originally wrote that book proposal, I thought I was going to do a lot of coverage of the kind of like fandom part of it. I touch on it, but I took out 40,000 words of the book. So it's a thin book, but it could have been a lot thicker. I tried to make it compelling and the stuff that interested me, but I think
we've learned that there's only so much you can say about that before it starts to feel mean. And Dan and we're allowed to get mean. You can't.
I really feel, and people, and also there's so many people that have this kind of, that use the Andy Griffith Show to teach religious instruction in churches, and like Andy was totally okay with that, but of course I know that like the guys that wrote that show, that's not what they were thinking about at all.
Yeah.
But and people assign meaning that is not really there, but if it gives people happiness and solace, and it's broad enough that obviously you can assign meaning to it and say compare it to whatever. People are welcome to do that. And that's basically what criticism is like, my book is like white noise.
You're really riding high on that, aren't you?
It made me so happy. I can't.
Do you want me to say it again so it's a blur, but this time I don't trail off and embarrass myself after the comparison?
Yeah, hang on. Dan, I'm getting a 3, 2, 1.
It really reminded me of White Noise in the way it sort of takes a mythological figure down to its base components and relates them to a more personal level. Just sort of perfect.
Stop.
Good. I was about to ramble.
Cut.
Yeah.
We've been doing this together for a long time.
I appreciate that. Yeah. But there's a lot about you. The book did, it does kind of move around, and because I was trying to portray different parts of the culture, and that was my ambition. And that part of it, the happiness it gives people who maybe might be broken in some ways, and for me, that's what that was. I didn't have a father, and it was painful. And my mom had a substance abuse problem and was in her bedroom most of my childhood, and she was doing her best. And people, when they found out that I was writing a book about Andy Griffith, would tell me these things too, and similar things, and men, our models are all over the place anyway, and a lot we have, even people that have fathers have odd relationships with their fathers a lot of times, and so it's those people who either had an unhealthy relationship or maybe an absent father that this was ideal. And if you think about it, every time you turn that show on, you're watching a father holding his kid's hand while they're going fish. Like, that's how the show starts. Every show. It doesn't matter if Opie's in the show or not, but you see that every time. you know.
I'm gonna tell a story because you know how a good host, when he has a guest on, makes it all about him. That's what good hosts do, right? But I've actually been waiting for Evan to come on for this. So we've talked about my dad. My dad's been battling illness for the past couple of months, and recently he started immunotherapy, which he says isn't chemo, but it's chemo. Right, that's a type. If you type in immunotherapy, it says it's a type of chemo. So my dad started chemo recently. He lives in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I'm not from North Carolina, but he lives there now. And my sister and I went to visit him recently before he started chemo. And one of the things we're in his apartment, and he just stops and says, "Do you want to go to Mayberry? Let's go see that place let's go see the thing that you're making fun of all the time. Let's go see that shit." So we get in the car, we drive out to Mount Pilot, to Mount Airy, and we do this. And so I guess what I'm saying here is I'm in the club now.
Yeah.
My feelings with my father, my relationship with my father is now, linked to Andy Griffith now.
It's
doing that. That's literally the last activity that he and I have done together. Thought I was going to dodge that bullet.
Yeah.
Didn't.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad you have that memory. And I hope you had a pork chop sandwich at Snappy Lunch. And
I do have to go back. I think we're going to go back during Mayberry days, but like incognito, right? Like not drawing any attention to ourselves,
right?
Because there are some people there that might murder us.
Yeah.
Is there like inner warfare between maybe community?
I don't think they know we exist.
No.
They haven't clocked us yet, but when that does happen, we are going to have to go dark for a little bit just to be safe. There's no signs of danger outwardly, but with that many people, you never know.
I want to be straight. I am honest. I'm honestly worried that they're going to come after me. I don't want.
They came after Koppel hard.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
They were so mad at Ted Koppel for having the audacity to say.
I did. What? Yeah, and I didn't mention that moment. I probably should have. But Ted Koppel trapped all those poor people on the bus and.
And all he really said was like, "Hey, why does your show not have any black people in it?" And also, what was the real Mount Airy like? Which you get into a little bit.
I talk about it a lot. Yeah,
yeah.
I definitely talk about race in America, and that Andy Griffith was in his early part of his career. He launched on the American culture as part of the first wave of the folk revival. So he was doing these monologues, and it is a kind of critical moment. I am arguing that he's a stand-in for Black America, that because the world was segregated, and American culture just could not face its own, racism, right? Mm-hmm. And so the white Southern, especially poor white Southern performers like Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Andy Griffith are stand-ins in some ways. And it was only later, the playing field filled up a little better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite part of your book is there's a little paragraph at the end at the end of one chapter that kind of says something to the effect of, the town that I grew up in was not that different from Mayberry. Well, except for the murders, the suicides, the pedophile. But then as soon as the whistle theme came on, I was there watching. And that's another one of those juxtapositions I like, that you just kind of like lay flat and just let it sit there.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I find it really interesting. And Mount Airy was like that too for Andy Griffith. And that was the point. That's what fascinates me the most, and probably what compelled me to write the book, was that he had a bad childhood. He did not like his upbringing in Mount Airy, being a working poor kid, and he was an only child. And
I believe you said he didn't return there for like 50 years, right? He didn't come back to like 2010.
He did visit his family on the down low, but he didn't publicly acknowledge visiting from 57 to like 2004. And it was and they paid him to come when they named a highway after him.
Oh yeah, I drove on that highway recently.
Yeah, the Andy Griffith Parkway. I mean, I'm sure he didn't despise all the people. He had friends and family that he loved, but he did not enjoy growing up working poor and the class prejudice that he endured. And he escaped through music, and that led him to acting. And he kind of remade himself. But yeah, and I discussed that a lot in terms of race in America. The thing that was the touchstone, the thing that launched him when he was 14 years old was watching the Bing Crosby film Birth of the Blues.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that a lot in the book.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot because I was just really fascinated by it, and it's about the birth of jazz. So the birth of jazz in America, if you watch Ken Burns' jazz documentary, is basically about America. Mm-hmm. And so it's the first art form that takes the world, that the world pays attention to, that's authentically American in its origin, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a complete, in its creation is based on inequity in enslaved people in Louisiana and New Orleans, and this other mix of cultures, French and English and other musical styles, and West African and military marches, German, and they create this new music, and then of course white musicians immediately
right
take it and say it's theirs, But that's not
Tom Hanks making a very weird accent, going, "He's what?" That whole process happens. That's later on, but that's not jazz. That's not jazz.
Yeah. That's not what Bing Crosby was doing though in the movie, and I know his reputation might be different.
Well, yeah, but Bing Crosby was doing was blackface. So,
well,
I've seen that movie too.
Well, that's the thing. If you could argue, and I think it's a good point to say that I'm not a scholar,
right?
But this is not an academic book. It's a book for the mass market. But even though it's a university press, but Bing Crosby was a huge proponent of black musicians throughout his career, and his reputation might, in other ways, I don't know, might be askew, but the entertainment industry, and this is a bold statement, but the entertainment industry in America is based on 19th century minstrel shows. So you could argue that everything is that. Like race and slavery in America is wrapped around every cultural artifact in America.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm talking about with when Andy Griffith emerges in 1953 and 4. It's on the folk revival that was the Lomaxes traveling the countryside with Leadbelly, gathering folk songs, right? And so it's cross cultural. But that was the origin of it,
I was also just referring to the movie Holiday Inn, in which Bing Crosby literally does do blackface.
Oh, yeah, I saw that over Christmas, and I was like, "Oh my god!" But yeah, that came from minstrelcy. And,
it's very much a minstrel show. Like,
yeah, but that's basically that's how Hollywood started too.
Yeah,
and the William Morris Agency, and all, and a lot of so.
I want to steer us a little bit away from being three white men talking about.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I want to steer us a little bit away from that.
Reconciling that, though, is important.
Right.
And the last thing I'll say about it is that, because I'm certainly not an apologist at all, but the Andy Griffith Show from 60 to 68 was just like the rest of the shows. There weren't any that were progressive. And Sheldon Leonard pushed for that, and he was the producer of the Andy Griffith Show. And so the next show he did was I Spy, which was the first black male lead, and just to make this even more uncomfortable, starring Bill Cosby.
It was The Cause. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was right at the end of that. So.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the reasons, because I follow the Andy Griffith fandom, and I do think one of the reasons that they tend to take it personally whenever there's any kind of question or criticism, and why they might come for you, Evan, and by extension us, is like nobody's doing podcasts about the Gospel of Gilligan's Island, right? Nobody's using I Dream of Jeannie for their Sunday sermons, right? There are no groups dedicated to saying like we should live life like these people in these other sitcoms, whereas the Andy Griffith Show has that. And I almost feel like I kind of want to yell, like, you guys are bringing this on yourself, right? When you open up the door and say that this television show that is a framework for how we should, it's a way of life, that leaves it as open to criticism as other ways of life, and then they don't like it when you do that, because then it's like, oh, it's just a show.
I think it's definitely worth examining, but the show itself was meant to be a balm, a miracle salve,
Yeah, right. Yeah. It was a salve of nostalgia.
The people who were making it certainly believed in social change, and there definitely it's a very human show, and so it did inform a lot of other shows being made. And I have seen criticism about the show as like a white utopia or something.
We've said that.
Yeah, and I disagree. That I do think it is what it is. It's a classless utopia. That the people that love it, it's because no one is being browbeat or belittled for being a working class person on that show, or poor or whatever. Even though they they have a little bit of class humor with like the Darlings and Ernest T, which is not really my favorite aspect of it.
I think there's truth in that. I think it kind of goes both ways, in that like once you divorce Mayberry as a concept from the actual Andy Griffith Show, like the thing we've noticed is the Rerun Watchers Club and all the stuff they do, they really focus on Mayberry, not Andy Griffith the man. And I think that the thing is, like, once it's a town, like an abstract place, you can kind of Rorschach painting it into a bunch of different interpretations. Like, it can be a classless thing about like lack of class, or it can't. Some people really frame it as like, oh, it's all about empathy and a certain like disposition in the way people talk to each other. It's all about small town values and wholesomeness. Like, you can, when it's like sort of divorced like that, you can kind of, you can look at it from three different angles and see three different things. And also you can kind of turn it into what you want it to be a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like
all of us are assigning our own meanings and bringing our own baggage onto this.
That's a great point, Dan. And that was one of the, the motivations for me to write the book was I noticed that happening, and people just kind of like superimposing their own whatever ideals or agenda or whatever on top of it. And but historically that's been done for thousands of years with every single
everything
that exists. But it's still, with all those things, with all the like actors and the kind of commercialized like tourism of it, and then the like people assigning like biblical meaning to it, and other people. There are people, I swear, there are people that believe that it was like this, like mapped out, like logistical message in a bottle thing. And when it's like, over 40 writers over
Right.
8 years and multiple producers and like
They're not keeping their own continuity
oh
straight,
my
as Dan and I
gosh,
have absorbed
no, not
millions of times.
they
They're
were writing
reusing
scripts.
gags. They're
They were writing scripts quickly and then going to the bar or going to the pool.
Oh, we've observed that. We've basically been like, and here's where the writer became drunk. Like this
that's true. I mean, and these writers were at the top of their game, and they worked in pairs, and they were all men, and they were all white. They were mostly Jewish, and they were mostly from the Northeast or other parts of the country, and so like when people talk about it's about small town values, I'm like, what? The guy grew up in Buffalo that wrote that. I mean,
what are you talking about? Right.
Or New York City. And it's like, and there are some parts of the show that you can see that where like, there are things that just don't exist in the South, where I grew up, like where the kids grab the tomatoes and throw it at old man Foley. Do you know that? Like that never happened in the South. That is something only a city kid would have even seen, because you don't have the carts out on the street, like in yeah. So anyway,
all right, Evan. It's 1965 now. Let's talk about where Dan and I have gotten to. We are at a very interesting time, I think, for the show. Don Knotts is on his way out. We're going into the color episodes, which there's mixed reviews on this at best from Andy Griffith fans. So we're doing a bit of a changeover. So can you paint me a picture? What does 1965 look like? Why does Andy continue to do the show after, he said he was only going to do 5 years? Do you know the make and model of the truck full of money they backed up onto his front lawn?
Yeah, I do. I know a little bit about it, but yeah, it's I mean, and I write in my book, I kind of like have this kind of a multiversal, dream fantasy that the show stops there.
Right. And you do a couple of what ifs.
What ifs. Yeah. I love that comic book when I was a kid. So I talk about it a lot, Andy insisted all along that he was not going to go past 5 years. And Don Knotts was, the breakout star of the show. And in 64, as the show was closing, he was offered a 5-picture deal with Universal, a pretty good film deal. And so Andy knew Don was leaving, and he didn't want to stay either. And there are multiple stories about it. It was ultimately a truck full of money, I think, backing up. And also maybe some arm twisting from the William Morris agency.
Mm-hmm.
But so he knew that going in, and I do feel like contractually, I don't know, like he listened to his managers. Or his manager, I should say, but he listened to his agent and his agent, Abe Lasvogel, was the head of the William Morris agency. And so I write about him a little bit in the book, but he was a very powerful figure. Probably at the time, the William Morris agency was the biggest agency in the world and responsible, when the Andy Griffith Show came on television, was responsible for 26 hours of television, not just packaging the shows. Every actor on the show, every writer, every director, every producer was all, and even the ad agencies that were selling products, it was all going through the William Morris agency.
Okay,
so that's what Andy was up against in his ear when he wanted to leave.
And they have a deeply vested interest in keeping that thing running.
Yeah, they wanted to keep it running, and he relented. And I think that he did have faith in Jerry Van Dyke, which these 2 episodes feature, or the last one does. And Jerry Van Dyke was supposed to be Don Knotts' replacement. Jerry Van Dyke and Andy had performed together in casinos. That was kind of like a sideline gig that he did. So they were all friendly. He performed in casinos with Don Knotts and Jim Nabors, and so he thought Jerry Van Dyke was a suitable replacement. He had a lot of faith in him.
Let's just go to that episode. Let's talk about it right now.
Awesome.
Let's go into this.
Let's jump straight to that one.
Let's go straight to Banjo-Playing. Let's go straight to Banjo-Playing Deputy.
I mean, that's really the thing is like, so the whole thing hinges on Jerry Van Dyke. That is what it's all about, him. And like,
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't finish my thought in the sense that Jerry Van Dyke left the Andy Griffith Show. He didn't sign up to replace Barney after these episodes.
This episode does not work out. Yeah.
Because he would have done it. They wanted him because he got offered My Mother the Car.
Yep.
Starring My Mother the Car. And that, my friends, could be a book in itself. My Mother the Car. Just one episode. Just the pilot. I could write a book just on like oral history of the pilot episode of My Mother the Car, which is the craziest. Like,
Evan, will you give us a 2-sentence synopsis of My Mother the Car? Just tell us the plot of My Mother the Car.
I have not heard of the television show.
I don't want to ruin it.
So I am very excited. No, ruin this.
I think you should.
If there was an avenue for me to learn what My Mother the Car is right now, it is this. Tell me.
We're absolutely gonna wind up doing a Patreon bonus episode
either you
about it.
Explain it to me, or I'm going to watch the episode right now.
I have not researched My Mother the Car, although I watched the pilot, and it is about a young married man played by Jerry Van Dyke who is sent to. He's kind of a bumbling guy. His very attractive wife and a family and friends and a normal life in suburban Los Angeles, it looks like. And he's sent to get a car, and he winds up getting this old clunker. Looks like it's from the 30s, and it is possessed by the spirit of his dead mother.
I was waiting so long because I knew how that sentence ended, and I was like, I like how long he's taking with this sentence. It's good timing, and I was just waiting.
I thought it was going to be like, and his mom was in the car, and then it was struck by lightning, and she was fused. But it's just like, oh yeah, he got a car, and then the car was his mom. Like,
it's what it says on the tin, Dan. I don't know what to tell you.
It's not even like the Incredible Turbo Teen or whatever that show was, or the
Transformer would be great.
Yeah. But okay, so that's the dumbest decision anyone has ever fucking made.
Yeah, it was bad management, I think. But it was a big swing. I mean, it was a big swing.
So let's get into the episode. But before I do, Evan, where can people buy? I'm gonna let you do it right here in the middle. We'll do the middle plug. Tell people where they can pre-order the book and all that thing.
You can pre-order it anywhere they sell books. The audiobook is Tantor Media or Recorded Books. I'm doing the opening launch at Diesel Bookstore in Santa Monica, California. So it'd be a favor to me if you ordered it through them. They're nice enough to let me launch the book there.
Hell yeah!
And what's the actual release date of the book?
The May 28th.
May 28th.
I'll be at Diesel Books on May 29th.
But let's go ahead and get into that episode. Let's go to the last episode of season 5, Banjo-Playing Deputy, season 5, episode 32. Originally airs May 3rd, 1965. Written by Bob Ross, not that Bob Ross, and directed by Kobe Ruskin. And here is your one-sentence summary from Wikipedia. Andy hires a shy, timid carnival banjo player, Jerry Van Dyke, as a temporary deputy. What this doesn't tell you is that it's Andy's fault that this man doesn't have a job in the first place.
Okay. All right. No. All right. So we're going to litigate the beginning of this episode because we're just going to jump right into it. So there's a carnival in town. Clara and another old lady walk out of what was the Sultan's favorite, which was a a dancing performance.
It's a belly dancer performance. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
there's no belly.
There's no belly dancing. They make the complaint that it is lewd and therefore Andy should shut it down. And Andy goes and he doesn't shut it down, but he does suggest, "Hey, can you make this less horny?" To which the guy goes like, "I can't make it less horny. What are you doing to me? I'm just going to leave town."
Yeah, which is great.
At first I was like, you know what? These two old ladies are exaggerating on the state of things in there. I'm sure it's just normal belly dancing. But you cut to the inside of the tent, and there's a bunch of guys who are not appreciating the arts, who are just like, just kind of like hunched over, like, that's right. And she's not like, she's barely dancing. She's just kind of like.
It's about the least amount of dancing possible.
It's also the least amount of stripping possible. This is a very enclosed woman. If anything, she was anti-naked. If such a thing exists,
she was basically hungover.
And Jerry Van Dyke's musical contributions are pretty slim as well. It is a little bit of a sad experience to be in this room. Yeah. The only saving grace, really the whole episode for me is Howard McNear playing Floyd the Barber.
Right.
Like that's it. He's just.
It allows Floyd to go full pervert, and I love it when
just full. And of course fans of the show know that he'd already had a stroke by that point, so he's propped up and he's doing these shows because it gives him so much joy, and they brought him back and worked it out. But he was so funny.
I think the line that he gets in this of, it's not. I'm paraphrasing, but like, it's not smut, it's culture. I should know. I've seen it 6 times. Is maybe his best line in the entire film, both in terms of like what is written for him and what Howard McNear delivers.
Well, yeah, and they also do they replay the quote bit they had from the earlier season, if you remember that.
I didn't clock that. What did they redo?
They do the Calvin Coolidge thing again.
Yeah,
right?
They do it again. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
I thought that was familiar.
Yeah, because it went over so big. I think, so you get to see it twice. Yeah.
Honestly, the funniest line that Howard McNear has for me in this one is when he's just discussing the like Cupid doll that he bought, the fine personal that he won at the shooting gallery, which was a big part of the last episode, the one that we're skipping for right now, we might get back to. But he won this Cupid doll, this beautiful porcelain doll, and he's wearing this very dumb straw, like fishing hat. And then he just, with I think like a palm tree on it, and then he just kind of like mildly says, matter of fact, I bought the hat. And I don't know why, but that killed me. That made me laugh.
He didn't win the hat. He bought it. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it was. Yeah,
this is a good Floyd episode.
Yeah, it was. It is worth it for that. Just to get a little, because he's not in every one either. But
this is a good Floyd episode. We've seen some bad Floyd episodes. Dan and I go back and forth on how we feel about the character, but I liked him in this.
When I saw this one, it made the SCTV imitation of Floyd the Barber, made more sense. Seeing this, because this is late Floyd,
We went through a period of just regularly screaming whenever he was on the scene of like, what is your deal? We don't understand what you're doing or why you're doing it. Like he was just kind of, it was before I think it was when he was like, is he bumbling? Is he a pervert? He's kind of acting like he's like turned on by everything that is happening around him all the time.
I think the easiest way.
Stroke Floyd is like, I get this guy's deal. He's just a little guy that doesn't understand what's going on.
He's a utility player. He'll whatever they need him to be, he'll do it. He's there for him. Yeah.
I think if imagine like if your barber that you go to, like you just hung out with him and you just had a vibe. You just knew that at home he had a really like comprehensive hentai collection. That's the vibe that Floyd lays down. And you know what? No judgment on that one.
Yeah.
I
I
read
know
them through the articles, Andy.
So
that's kind of that was the SATV treatment
yeah.
a little bit.
So Andy,
Eugene Levy just does a great Floyd the Bug.
oh yeah, and Eugene Levy's the perfect casting for that. Honestly, the eyebrows are the same.
Yeah.
So Andy does. It's debatable to say, does he shut this down? He sort of enforces and heavily suggests that they should tone it down, which I have no idea how they could possibly tone it down anymore. Again, this woman is not sexual.
Andy was stepping on this guy's constitutional rights.
Oh yeah, this is the angriest I've been at Andy in a while.
It was uncomfortable for everyone. I think it was out of character for that character a little bit, but he was very polite and was just kind of tone it down. The ladies that were complaining.
He was very polite, but he does say, like, I don't want to get into an argument. So if you could just do what I tell you, like, it's authoritarian. He's pushing.
Yeah, no, he makes himself big there, and
he's
they're close
big
together. But I kind of liked it I mean, it served the plot, right? Because we have to get Jay Van Dyke fired, right? So,
yeah.
But I liked that the guy was like, hell, fuck no, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah. I had a much different read on the tone of Andy Griffith's, like, hey, tone. I was like, my read on it was like, hey, the old ladies told me to say this. Tell me that you're going to tone the show down, and then I'm going to leave, and it's not my problem anymore, and then just don't change anything. Basically, I got the tone of like, I don't give a shit. Tell me that you're going to change it. Make her put on an extra sock, and I'll just walk out of here.
I didn't read that at all.
You read it very different, that he was like going full big dog on him.
I read that as definitely big dog, and maybe that's because I tend to look for that. But yeah, I felt like he was definitely like pushing it in. But he doesn't care, right? Like, that's the worst part to me, is that he doesn't find any of this objectionable. The men in the audience all seem kind of bored and angry to be there, and so I think this episode shows that we've been worried about how Andy like rules over this society with seemingly no oversight, but it turns out the actual ruler of Mayberry is whatever old woman talks to Andy most recently. That's the actual despot.
There's never an election for Andy on the show. The sheriffs are typically elected officials in counties.
Barney ran against him recently and gave up.
So basically, the whole premise of the show
mayor anymore.
It's like he wouldn't be the Mayberry sheriff; it would be a county sheriff.
Yeah,
but
there is no mayor.
I'm not going to argue that now, and he knew that then, but people didn't care. But my take on the character is that it's that, especially the early seasons, is that most of the writers were World War II veterans, and that they were making fun of, not only they're making fun of fascism, like Mussolini kind of style fascism with Barney, with his gun and his badge and his, he's like very buttoned down, and Andy's the opposite of that, and cares just more about the community, and he does like to tuck his shirt in. He's clearly not a rule follower. He's like a Ulysses character. He's always bending things around and like skirting around stuff. He does, like when he weighs Barney down to get him to make weight. I mean, he's not like a draconian guy,
Our read on it has always been that Andy Griffith, and especially season 1 Andy Griffith, which I think is our favorite, is that he is a con man that is dressed like a sheriff.
Right.
Is like all of his immediate go-to instincts and solutions to issues are that of a like Kansas City con man.
It's his number one move is just lie. Right?
Yeah.
That's how he resolves most of his.
Which is our favorite quality of him, I would say, is
we're
the
big
fact
fans of that.
Yeah, like.
Well, the roots of that, if to be a little pedantic about it, the roots of that I think are in like the like the Jack tales, Appalachian folk tales, and like he's
Ooh.
kind of like a Jack character, you know.
I mean, he's a trickster god. Well,
Yeah.
god a little bit in
It's
there,
obviously full. Yeah, and that
especially
would make
season 1.
and and so season 1, he's still kind of building that character, and I think he does have more of that in him. And I think season 2, 3, 4, he's dialed it all back a little bit, and
The more that he has to become dad. All right, so as a result of this whole mess, and the promoter deciding, screw this, I'm just going to move to the next town, he fires his musical accompanist, Jerry Van Dyke, who's just playing a character named Jerry.
Andy doesn't do a thing to get his money back.
Yeah,
what the fuck?
He could have if it reality, right? He could have gone throttled the guy, said, "Pay your drummer, pay your horn player." You know,
yeah, that was insane.
But no, he didn't.
He was just like, oh, you're too much of a wimp to get your money back. Well, I'll give you a place to stay.
Yeah,
the guy is right there. He's literally right there.
He could, he's like, I heard you fired this guy without paying him. That's, how would you like to spend the night in jail? He could have done that. But then the story wouldn't have moved forward, right? So
that's true.
Yeah.
It's not,
So sometimes we have to play like then there would be no story or there would be no episode. But it is a little frustrating. I would have liked just one line from the sleazy promoter, the Paul Giamatti character, I would have like one line where he was just like, we promised you $30 for 2 weeks on the job. We're not doing 2 weeks. Bye. Right? Just like some sleazy promoter logic.
You've inspired me now, because now I want Paul Giamatti to play this in a stage adaptation.
God,
at like Largo in Los Angeles, they did that for the Jeffersons and all those Norman Lear.
Yeah, they did a couple of Norman Lear live ones. They aired them on ABC recently.
Why not? Yeah, why not this one? And have
why not?
Okay,
Paul Giamatti, because that's what he does. He plays sleazy agents. It's the thing he's or like
he's
weird,
great.
Charming guys.
I want to jump us straight to the meat of this thing.
Okay,
both big picture and small picture. So
push us forward, friend.
Jerry Van Dyke. He is, what's the guy? The name of the character that he's playing?
Jerry. It's just Jerry.
It's just Jerry. Sick. So Jerry Van Dyke is introduced as this bumbling banjo player. He is awkwardly shoved into the role of deputy, and this is basically his pitch for he's the new Barney. How do we feel both in terms of this episode and in terms of his potential as the Barney Fife of the remainder of the show? How do we feel about Jerry as a character? Do we think
not a fan?
A fan.
I'm glad it didn't happen. I mean, and I didn't like Warren either, and no one else did.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's a Boston story too. But
we know nothing about this guy. We're going into that. Like, I kind of don't want you to spoil that dude, because I kind of want to go in.
Yeah, that's next season, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there's some comedy gold there. There's some real gold there. He started his career with George Carlin.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Jerry Van Dyke, he reprised his career with Coach at the end of his career and had a lot of success there. But he was always in his brother's shadow, and
the little brother energy coming off of this guy is palpable.
It's just hard to not compare him to Dick Van Dyke and to find him wanting. Like, it's just they're so similar. He's just we have Dick Van Dyke at home.
It didn't. It did. They're both kind of odd-looking people to be, not to be unkind about it, but
be unkind.
Dick Van Dyke was this enormous star, and Jerry Van Dyke always looked like kind of like mushed up Dick Van Dyke, right? Like, it's just like he looks just like him. He's like slightly.
I'll be mean. He's the Clint to Ron Howard, right?
That's true. If Clint or Ron watches this or listens to this,
we used to tell our followers to tweet angrily at Clint Howard.
I think they're awesome
Ron
people.
Howard.
But Jerry Van Dyke and Andy were friends, and they also, Sheldon Leonard produced the Dick Van Dyke Show. So the origins are all intertwined. So they were from the same kind of DNA, showbiz DNA.
I mean, I think Jerry Van Dyke is. What if I think he's actually more like conventionally attractive than Dick Van Dyke, and I think he's much more like. I think he's much more like traditional than Dick Van Dyke, but he doesn't have that like that energy, like that like both like physically and comedically. He doesn't have that same zap to him.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, he's not a live wire.
I feel like you have to. I wonder. I haven't looked into this, so forgive me if this is just way off. But Bob Newhart.
Wild speculation on this show?
Yeah,
unheard of.
You have to stop curbing this stuff. Just go, man.
Bob Newhart played that character so well. Mm-hmm. Kind of stammering, soft-spoken comedian.
Yeah.
And Jerry Van Dyke had a stand-up. Like, he was a successful stand-up comedy touring guy, right? Mm-hmm. He would open for Andy at casinos, right? He had a strong act, but he wasn't Bob Newhart.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
But he was kind of like in that mold of like the kind of stammering, nervous, like. But yeah, well, I wonder though if in the lens of the time, like maybe people thought he was funnier. I just never thought that character was that funny. However, his character on Coach, I thought he nailed it. I thought he did great on that. You know?
See,
so I want to talk about Jerry the character.
Yeah, I didn't find the character that funny, but I found like Jerry Van Dyke sort of a soothing presence, and I liked sort of this character's energy sort of as an opposite to Barney Fife, of like Barney Fife, a character that you have to constantly tone down and bring down and slow down, as opposed to this guy who is just porridge that you have to try to build up into anything.
All right, for our listeners, I want to explain the character of Jerry as portrayed in this show. So Jerry is he's very meek, he's mild-mannered, he doesn't stand up for himself enough to get his money back, and the big like hook of his character is that he forgets words, or he stammers a little bit, and he will pause and people will have to fill in like parts of his sentence for him, which is painfully unfunny and gets old real fast. I think that maybe Jerry Van Dyke could have done something interesting, but like this character is nothing. And to Dan's point, there is one scene where Jerry is wearing a sheriff's uniform. He's made himself deputy against Andy's wishes, and he's patrolling around the carnival, and the fight breaks out, and Jerry has to like break up this fight. The way that scene would have gone if it was Don Knotts is that he's going to get big, he's going to get loud, he's going to be boisterous. So you've got this little man screaming and being pushed back and forth between two big guys who are fighting around. The way that it goes with Jerry is this little dude just kind of stammers, goes, "Fellas, please stop that. I have a badge. I would like you to stop, please." And it goes on for too long. And of those two options, the Don Knotts choice is infinitely funnier.
He's on the edge of the crowd too, and like can't get over. And they're trying. You mentioned Don Knotts is like perfect because what they tried to do was they tried to basically write Barney's origin story with a new character, and with someone kind of like pantomiming a new version of Barney, I guess, but that's not how they created. Don Knotts created that character. It was a slow burn, and they introduced it, and then it came in later, and then when it was with the episode with Howard McNear with the fugitives, from the women's prison.
I'm sorry. Do you mean Woman Hunt?
That was when then that everyone knew what they had.
That was when it starts. That's the origin right there.
And he had a lot of tools in his tool belt, but
Jerry has none.
It's just like Don Knotts. I mean, but and maybe it's unfair to Jerry Van Dyke to compare him to Don Knotts. But but it will go one better. Don Knotts as Mr. Furley was horrible. That's just a big, broad kind of character and mooning all the time. I hated that show, and that with I like the Ropers better.
I actually didn't realize, because I only catch Three's Company now and then. We're gonna have to get into Three's Company. I didn't realize until very recently, doing research for our last episode, that Don Knotts only comes in at like season 4 of Three's Company.
What? I thought he was there the whole time. I have
Nope.
not.
Yep.
See, I used to watch Three's Company on Nick at Night, so I had like no concept of like
They
the
did a
chronology
spin-off.
of it. I thought.
Oh,
The
actually,
Ropers
Dan,
was
Dan,
one.
we could do this for our mini series on Backdoor Pilots, because the Furleys actually do spin off to their own series, which fails
Ropers.
miserably. Sorry, the Ropers. The Ropers spin off to their own series, which fails miserably. So yeah, I don't think this would have worked. God, I watched this episode twice. The first time I was like, I wonder why they didn't have Jerry on more. Like, Jerry just kind of disappears. This is clearly his audition tape and he doesn't go on. And the second time I watched it, I was like, oh, because this sucks.
Well, yeah, no, they would have kept him. They would have cast him, I think, and if it, but if
it wasn't for that dastardly
my mother in the car.
Holy shit!
We could have had a couple of years of Jerry.
I didn't know this until 20 minutes ago, and now I think this is one of the all-time Hollywood mistakes. Like, one of the dumbest decisions in television history.
Yeah,
holy shit!
It definitely goes. It touches the whole fabric of the entertainment universe, really, because what would have happened to the actor that played Warren? Like if he hadn't
we would never have heard of him ever. Like, nothing.
No, I think he may have had a better career, because that show ruined him in a lot of ways. And he was pretty funny. He was a kind of avant-garde comedian, Jack Burns from Boston, and he started his career with George Carlin, and when they were in the military and they were DJs, and then he had another sidekick who they did pretty good, stand-up, and he's well. Like he hosted an early episode of Saturday Night Live. Like he did a.
Oh, I've seen that episode. Okay, yeah, that's why that name sounded familiar to me.
Did I don't know. Jack Burns is. They just pretended it never happened on that show. But it's like the Andy Griffith Show is so precious to so many people, and they act like it was just kind of like, cast in bronze from like Mount Olympus or whatever, and it was all these like, Hollywood manipulations and business decisions being made, and
what you've had time to do and what we've had time to do is sort of like cut open the casing of the sausage. This isn't just watching how the sausage is made. This is taking a complete sausage and slicing it open and analyzing how it came to be, right? We've had the time to do that. Most people don't want or shouldn't do that, right? We're madmen. The three of us are crazy for this.
I'm really gonna tune in when you get to season 8. Oh my god! Like,
Jesus
you guys
Christ!
Your brains are just gonna explode. Because it's crazy stuff happens, and like you say, oh, do you remember that Andy Griffith episode where Aunt Bee becomes a television star and gets really big and famous and like. No, that doesn't happen. Yes, it does happen.
I also wanted to
yes, it does.
Just at the rate that we're going, when we hit season 8, I'm going to be 40 years old.
Yes.
I'm going to be a 40-year-old man at that point. Just think about this.
All the writers were different, and they were it was sitcom-y, and Andy is in such a bad mood half the time, and he admitted it. He was like, it was time to go, and I didn't even know my lines. I was just like, he regretted not leaving, but then.
I do know that this show ends on a backdoor pilot. The show ends with them saying, just trying to spin for Mayberry RFD. Just money. Hey, man.
There was more money. Yeah, more. He wanted, they did a spinoff of Mayberry RFD, which ran for 3 seasons, and that got axed in the Royal Purge. it wasn't the Andy Griffith Show. It was Mayberry RFD, and also the new Andy Griffith Show would just no one was watching it, and they were just on Nielsen ratings were, and it just I don't know There's one episode you can watch on YouTube with Glenn Campbell.
I like Glenn Campbell.
I know, and he was with William Morris, and William Morris
of course he was.
The show, and they got him. They got Aaron Rubin to produce it, the producer from the first 5 seasons or four seasons of. He left with Jim Neighbors, and they got the best writers. They got Fritz L. and Greenbaum, and and it is ridiculous. It doesn't work at all.
All right, I will spin us back to this episode of the
This episode. You could probably tell it's making me sad to talk about this episode.
Do you want to go to the other one?
It's like a bad ending to like this magical thing. I'm gonna be if I'm flipping channels in a hotel or something and it's on, I might watch it. But if I'm choosing, I only watch like season 2, 3, and 4 pretty much.
Yeah.
That seems to be the case, and I believe you told me that like some stations will actually lie.
They noticed people were dropping off when they would air the color episodes. So some markets just make them black and white. Yeah,
so
they do. They've
ingenious.
Done that.
So yeah, we've said this before, right? It's kind of like how if I say I like The Simpsons, no, I don't. Right? I mean, I like seasons 3 through 10, and that's being generous.
I like that it exists. I had Simpsons. I had the first Simpsons T-shirt that was ever made. And,
oh yeah,
but I stopped watching that show 20 years ago.
So
but it's still brilliant,
So I think it's safe to say that Andy meter for this episode for Evan fairly low, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a spin-off episode to try to create something new with a new character to replace Don Knotts, and I think it's indicative that they didn't really know what they had, how they had lightning in a bottle, because you can't recreate it, and I mean the show was great for a lot of reasons, but it wasn't just because of like pratfalls and like physical comedy and it was other things, and they could have done a slow build up to develop those characters, but they just wanted to replace Barney with another version.
I'm gonna be honest.
I think the problem is that like replacing Don Knotts in this show is kind of an impossible task, because
it is.
If you have him, if you make the new character too much like Barney Fife, it's going to just draw the comparison of like, well, he's not as good as Don Knotts. Like you're just getting Barney Fife with a worse actor. So what they go for is, well, we're going to go opposite direction. We're going to do the anti-Barney Fife, and we're going to have the push and pull be completely polar opposite. But the problem is that like Andy Griffith is so fundamentally rooted as a comedic character in slowing another person down, getting a person that is hysteric to like take a beat or just be mocking somebody that is in over their head. He can't be a speed person up. Like if him and Jerry are in a room together for an hour, like that's going to be the slowest conversation in the fucking world. Like the whole dynamic of him is that Barney Fife would talk a mile a minute and Andy would like just roast things he said, which
if anything, Jerry's too close to Andy, right? They both have just kind of calm presence. Hell, they both play instruments. They could be a bluegrass band together.
They were good friends, and they shared business interests, and actually later Jerry Van Dyke bought Andy's house. It's lucky that it didn't go on, and I'm glad we have My Mother the Car, but it's not a terribly memorable episode. And
listeners, I'm just gonna. I don't give a shit if we do all the plot beats of this episode.
Yeah,
I'm actually gonna wrap it up here because I think we've said the important stuff about this. Listeners, don't watch this episode. Like it doesn't matter. You get to watch a failed tryout. Whatever. It's fine.
Historic, just to be historically full, to have, you should have an understanding of why. But yeah, I'm really glad that we've talked about it though, because I now am inspired to do a stage adaptation.
Hell yeah!
So that's going to be great.
I am gonna, you guys. I think we can also burn through the other Carnival episode, the one that came before this, real quick, because I don't think there's a lot to that episode, but I think it's worth noting. It's Opie and the Carnival. Big question: why are there 2 Carnival episodes? Did they just rent the set and wanted to make the most of it?
Because it takes like 15 minutes to make one of these episodes, and they had rented the Carnival set for 2 weeks, so like they're gonna get their money's worth.
There may be, I don't know the story behind it. But there may have been a cost, and they weren't canning things very far in advance, so they generally were rehearsing the show that would air next week, the week before, and so those shows were being made at pretty close to when they were being aired. So
I've always kind of wondered that, actually, because I was wondering this. Let me do it right now. The next episode is season 5, episode 31, Opie and the Carnival. Originally airs April 26, 1965, and I have to assume filmed April 8th, 1965. Written by Fred Freeman and Lawrence J. Cohen, directed by Kobe Ruskin. Here is your one-sentence summary from the Wikipedia. The Wikipedia, I'm an ancient man. Opie tries to win a birthday present for Andy at a carnival, unaware that the shooting gallery is a scam. So, this episode is about the hardest thing in the world, buying your dad a present. This is such a I feel for Opie on this. This is deeply difficult. Moms are easy. You can get moms anything for Christmas. Dads are impenetrable. It's very difficult to figure out what to buy for your dad. And there's a carnival in town. Opie goes to a shooting gallery that is rigged, but in order to drum up business, the shooting gallery carnival barkers give this cute little kid the one gun that functions correctly, the one rifle. He does really well at first. He wins a porcelain seagull. No, a porcelain pelican. Yeah, a statue of a porcelain pelican. He considers briefly giving a porcelain pelican to Andy for his birthday. Aunt B talks him out of this, said that's not a gift for a grown man. And I just want to point out here, I am 35 years old. If anyone wants to give me a porcelain pelican for my birthday, I will happily accept this. I am a grown man.
Yeah. And Aunt B set it all in motion. Yeah.
And throughout this, basically it consists of Opie trying and failing to go back to the shooting gallery to win an electric razor at this carnival game, by the way. Carnival games apparently used to have way better prizes. Of course, the game is rigged. He goes through it. He loses all of his allowance money. He gets Goober to try out, and Goober loses a bunch of his money. And then finally, Andy and Helen have to step in to investigate what's going on with the crooked carnival games. So this is basically a PSA. Hey, carnival games can be scammy.
Yeah.
I love carnivals, and both of the episodes in that regard are kind of unique for the Andy Griffith Show, where it's this kind of outside society, because carnivals, that's what the appeal of them is. They're like this traveling medieval type kind of like entertainment that is like you step into it and you're in a different world,
and it's liminal, right? Like there's a limited amount of time that it's there.
Yeah,
it can only exist for
transient,
and
clearly at the time it was still considered that it attracted shady characters, so
right.
But
I don't think that's ever gone away.
Right? No, I probably shouldn't, No. But I can't imagine what a razor would have cost in '65. Like it'd been like 3 weeks' pay probably. I don't know.
That thing is going to take a chunk out of his skin the second he tries to use it.
Yeah.
That Carney razor is not going to be of high quality.
But they were, the Carney guys were using Opie to get in the other customers. That's why they let him win the Pelican. And the show, it could have just ended with him giving him the Pelican, and that was the show. That'd have been great.
Honestly, yeah, I would have liked that. There are some moments in this episode that I do like. I always like it when we actually get Opie and Aunt B moments together, right? It seems like for a show that's about this woman coming to raise, we don't actually get a whole lot of Opie and Aunt B moments. They're kind of few and far between. So we get a good one here with this conversation. I like the scene where Opie is trying to get Andy to give up what he wants for his birthday, and Andy's only halfway playing along.
Mm-hmm.
And he finally says that what he would really wish for if he could have anything is a new basketball. And Opie sees right through it. It's like, well, he's just saying that because he thinks I want a basketball.
Yeah.
Because I told him. I like that. I even like, I think I after watching these episodes a second time, I think I actually really like Opie and the Carnival. I think it's light. There's not a whole lot to it. But I wound up really enjoying most of the performances. I think everybody's, got their heart in the right place on this one. If I have to nitpick, if I have to do our Barney meter thing, I'm like, all right, well, the only reason why any of this resolves happily is because Opie's dad happens to be the sheriff. But whatever,
Yeah.
like, so I like this episode quite a bit. But it's also just, it's fluff. It's fun.
It's fine. It's a good time.
Yeah, I remember liking it when I was a kid, and the fact that Opie loses all his money, it's like kind of tragic. And Goober jumping in to try to save him is like, what? This friendly gas station attendant is like, saved my birthday present.
He says. Cooper has a line in here where he's like, I don't know much about anything, but I know cars and guns. Those are the two things I know, cars and guns. And honestly, I know many people that would also describe themselves that way.
Yes, absolutely.
It's honestly the most I've ever felt connected to Goober.
A lot of people felt seen when they heard that line.
Oh, yeah. I would love to start a magazine called, like,
Cars and Guns Monthly?
Guns magazine.
No, I think for me it would be...
I think that exists.
It would be Cars, Pocketknives, and Moisturizer.
Well, that's the title of the fucking episode.
Yeah, way to go. All right.
Yeah. Done in one. Hell yeah.
A good men's magazine. I do love all those things.
Honestly, yeah. I would
subscribe.
Yeah, I would use that magazine.
Right. Well, I'm looking for backers, so we'll see if I get any funding. But wanting to get
buy the book. Buy the book to fund this magazine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Andy tells the Carney people want to just give him the prize because he's the sheriff, and he's like, no, if he wins it, it's just going to be fair and square. So he levels the playing field. I don't know, and I like that episode. I it's kind of simple, but
there is another aspect to the Carney's scam, which is that they keep swapping out guns for the. So all they've done is bend the sights. So anyone who is like has any experience with a rifle can figure out like, okay, this sight is tweaked to the right, so I'll just aim to the left a little bit. But they don't let you do that. They keep swapping it out.
They keep swapping it. I mean, you could honestly, you would know that with a water gun if you
Sure, that's true. That's true. I shouldn't say anyone with any experience with rifle. Anyone with depth perception.
Anyone that can see straight.
Anyone who's ever played Duck Hunt.
Yeah. Even when the sights are straight, those pellets do curve, So. Yeah,
sure. I mean,
but it's a sweet episode. It's just kind of like the you get a kind of vicarious satisfaction of saving the day, like watching it resolve itself. I remember liking it, and
yeah.
Especially when I was 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah, if you're Opie's age of watching this is a hero episode, right?
Well, and you also think an electric razor is probably the greatest invention in the world, and you can't wait till and then you get older and you get one. He's like, this is stupid. Like, why would I want to use this?
This episode, though, is deeply entrenched in dad feelings, right? Like,
Yeah.
I want to get something for my dad, and then dad steps in to save the day, and I
don't have any money to do it.
This is a big Andy Griffith daddy episode. This is an episode where I think, Evan, maybe you'll probably agree. This is one of the big ones where Andy serves as like America's dad fill-in, right?
Right.
This is one of the daddest.
It absolutely is. Yeah, and it wouldn't exist if someone had just told Opie he could have made one of those IOU cards. That's like what.
There's a pretty good gag. Johnny Paul Jason, Opie's little friend, gets a pretty funny line in this where he says that last year he gave his dad, like, I think it was like a coat rack or something that he made, and his dad says that it was so nice he put it right in his storage shed.
Yeah, that was a good bit.
Yeah.
These last two have a couple of bangers in them.
I appreciate that. Bring the Carnival back. Maybe we need more Carnival episodes. Maybe that's what brings the magic in.
Oh yeah, more. I mean, Howard McNear. Anything with Floyd, you just put that on a loop.
So yeah, I think if I was making like an Andy Griffith Show like Father's Day playlist, this has to be one of the top ones. There are episodes where Andy just seems to forget he has a kid, and that's fine too.
Well, Ron Howard had to go to school, so that's true. They couldn't shoot with him every day.
That's true.
Yeah,
those pesky child labor laws kind of get in the way of the continuity sometimes. I think that's going to wrap this up for us. Evan, thank you for being here.
It was a lot of fun, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It was a blast.
Thanks for the support, and it's fun talking with you. I'm going to tune in and listen to what you guys do in the later seasons because they're just completely bonkers.
Yes. We're never escaping, Dan. We're never getting out.
I know. We're going to be in a fucking retirement home doing this show.
Oh, and there's a young Rob Reiner on one of them too. And
I knew that.
Yeah,
I knew that.
I'm pretty into that.
Yeah.
And, a pre-meathead Rob Reiner.
And you get William Burroughs. William Burroughs? What? Charles? I forget.
William Burroughs wrote.
No, nothing.
I wrote Naked Lunch.
I'm really exhausted.
I was very excited. I was like, "Are you shitting me? He got in on this?"
This is the guy that made Cheers and The Simpsons.
Damn.
Okay. James L. Brooks.
James Brooks. Yeah. You're gonna that last season. There's at least one that's
dropping. We're dropping a lot of references to postmodern writers this episode.
Yeah.
Anybody want to do a Murakami shout out real quick? Okay.
I know. I love that accent. It was all the shooting thing that made me think of William Burroughs.
Yeah.
That was it.
All right. Good job, English majors. We all did it. Right. Listeners, this is going to wrap us up for season 5. Dan and I are going to take a quick break, not a long break this time. Dan and I are going to be back very quickly, though, we're going to do a new season of Parental Control and possibly some more episodes of Backdoor Lovers. So we're going to do our like hiatus mini-series, and then we'll be back for season 6 of the Andy Griffith Show shortly. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for sticking by us. Ratings, reviews, Patreon, you all know the deal. Buy a sword, battlingblades.com, keyword Mayberry. You know what will help you? You know what? That's a good gift for Dad. I should have done that.
I'm so tired. God damn you.
Okay. No, all right.
It's 10.
We'll see you all down at the fishing hole. Ba-da-ba Ba-doom.